Hi and welcome. This week I'm actually reviewing the SculpFun S10 laser engraver / cutter. Now I have an interest in engraving. Some of you may have seen a previous video I did on a gravograph pantograph engraver. That's a manual machine that uses a rotating head to engrave various materials. Well, I've always had an interest in this sort of technology, so when these laser engravers became affordable, I decided it was probably time I bought one. Now, SculpFun is a Chinese company, and they have really 4 models in their range. There's the S9, which has a 5.5 watt laser, the S10, which has a 10 watt laser, and there's the S30 and the S30 Pro. The S30 can be had with 3 different laser heads up to 20 watts, and the S30 Pro you can have up to a 30 watt laser head, and that really provides a decent cutting capability. The S10 can cut 6mm plywood and can also engrave a range of materials. You can also cut plastics like acrylic plastics and other materials like that, but you really do have to be careful of the fumes. Just do a little bit of research on the materials before you cut them, or ask on the forum. I'll put the link to the SculpFun forum. They have a Facebook forum below. It's a very useful resource, I can tell you. They've answered a few questions for me and really got me up and going with this machine. We'll just go through the mechanical operation of the machine first. So the machine basically is a frame, and it comes disassembled. So you actually bolt on the side rails, mount the 2 rubber belts for the Y-axis. The gantry, which has the X-axis on, comes complete. You just have to bolt on the actual laser head. We've got an area of about 400 by 410 millimeters, and you've got 2 stepper motors, one here for the X-axis and one here for the Y-axis. And the Y-axis one drives this driving rod here, and there's tooth belts on both sides that'll move the machine forwards and backwards. And there's a belt here which moves the laser head in the X-axis, left and right. So to assemble, as I said, you bolt the frame together, put the little controller on the front, which is bolted on, bolt on the laser head, and run the wiring. Now I've got a couple of accessories fitted to this machine. I've got the limit switches. There's an X limit switch here and a Y limit switch here. So I've fitted these on and run the wires. The wire runs on the back there and down through the harness there. Now the idea of the limit switches is that it allows the machine to know exactly where the laser is. Without the limit switches, the machine actually sets its origin point at where the head happens to be when you turn the machine on. But with the limit switches, if you push the home button in your software, the laser will travel to the corner and will calibrate itself so that it knows where it is on the bed. And certainly if you want to repeat work, say on a given template, it's certainly a good idea to have the limit switch option. And that option is an extra $40 Australian. I didn't actually mention the price of the machine itself. The machine, this particular machine in Australia, cost me $660. The limit switches, as I said, cost $40. This honeycomb bed, which actually is used when you wish to cut through material, it actually allows you to get a much cleaner cut if you can actually allow the laser to pass through, and any smoke, dust or soot can actually go through as well, so it doesn't actually contaminate the work. So that's an option, and that was around $95 for that in Australia. And the other option I've got is the air assist pump. You can see this hose here. The machine comes with the hose, but there's a little pump on the end of that, which is a little bit like an aquarium air pump, which pumps air around the nozzle and blows ash and smoke away from the laser beam. It means that when you're in the cutting mode, it actually cuts far more effectively and you get a much cleaner cut without contamination of the material that you're cutting. As an example, this gear, which is 6mm plywood, which is about the limit that you can actually cut with this particular machine. On the back side, this is an early try, you can see it's very sooty, and that's the result of actually cutting it actually sitting on another piece of wood, so that there was nowhere for that soot and ash to go except into the area between the two materials. So that really led to that contamination there. The other items I have here, I've got this little logo here that's cut into, I think this is Merbu, a bit of scrap that I did this trial onto. I think that was about 40% power at 1,000 millimeters a minute. So that's actually provided quite a nice cut. I actually was using the air assist on this, which isn't recommended for engraving as such, because it actually deposits some of the soot into the area surrounding the actual engraving, and it means that you actually have to sand it off, which can also affect the sharpness of the engraving. This final little one here, which has now got a little bit of ash on it, was a coaster that I did as a little bit of a trial project. It's a Moto Guzzi big block engine. So I did that in 2 passes. The actual engraving was done at 30% power at 100 millimeters a minute. Sorry, 1,000 millimeters a minute, I should say. And the cutting was done at 100% power at 100 millimeters a minute. And that was done with 2 passes to actually get it to cut that 3mm plywood. Oh, I should also say that actually took 6 passes to cut that ply. And that's the 6mm ply. So I'll go through some of the specs of this machine. As I said, the cutting area is 410 by 400 millimeters. Now you can actually get extended Y-axis rails for these. You can actually extend this bed lengthwise up to 900 millimeters. So if you need to engrave something on a fairly large area, buying those as an accessory and bolting them on as required, or even leaving them on the machine, would be a good option. The 10-watt laser head actually uses 2 laser diodes, and actually a blue colour, and they are actually combined using, I assume, a semi-silvered mirror and focused at a particular point on the bed. Now they quote a service life of 15,000 hours, which I reckon is pretty good, and certainly I think the laser diodes will outlast my usage of the machine. Now you do have to focus the laser onto the object that you're going to be engraving, and that's done by using this little standoff here. So for example, if you were going to engrave 3mm plywood, and we'll use this coaster as a test, you would loosen the 2 locking screws on the back of the laser. Just flip this, stick this under here, drop that down on it, do up those screws, slide that out, and now that's set to the correct height to engrave or cut 3mm plywood. Now we should cover a little bit about laser safety. Lasers can be dangerous to your eyesight, and certainly there's enough wattage in here to permanently blind you if you were being careless. If possible, you should always leave the shield in place, though the shield doesn't protect the machine from the rear. But if it's on a table up against the wall, that's not a major problem. But even with that shield in place, there is a chance of stray reflections reflecting off objects that you're engraving or other materials around that could actually come in contact with you or a pet or someone else who happens to be in the room. So I certainly recommend that at a bare minimum that you wear the supplied safety goggles, or better still buy a pair of approved safety goggles and wear those whenever the machine is active. Now, if you intend to use the machine in a busy workplace, I certainly recommend getting an enclosure for it. The manufacturer of this machine does offer an enclosure. It's made out of a red acrylic plastic. Some actually are sort of like a fabric tent with a viewing window. And any of those sorts of enclosures, or one that you build yourself, would certainly protect anyone in the vicinity of the machine while it's in operation. And as I said earlier, just be careful of your choice of materials. Some materials do give off toxic fumes. Just make sure that you have adequate ventilation in the area that you're working. Well, I think it's time to reposition the camera around to the computer monitor, and I'll let you have a look at the software. I'm not going to do an in-depth review of the software that I use. I'm actually using a software package called LightBurn that costs around $99 for a license. And you can install it on 2 computers. I've got one installed on the computer down here in the garage, and I've also got one installed on my computer in the house where I do most of my design work. So we'll move over to the computer, and I'll set it up and actually burn one of these coasters just as an example of how the machine works, and give you an idea of the speed of the laser head and the cutting process. Let's open up our software. So this is LightBurn, and as you can see, the coasters over here, I've already got that file loaded in. Now the coaster's actually in 2 layers. The blue layer is the actual engine block itself, and the black layer, which is the line around the edge, is the cutting layer. And you can give each layer different attributes. So the engraving layer is at 30% power at 1,000 millimeters a minute. And that's going to happen first. And then the second layer, which is the black layer, is at 100 millimeters a minute and at 100% power. And that's going to be done in 2 passes. You can't actually see the number of passes here. You have to open up a detail of that individual item. So we'll just open that up. And on this, you can actually see 2 passes, 100 millimeters a minute, 100% power. We've got our design tools over here. You can also import images, whether they're bitmaps for engraving, or vector files, which you can use for engraving or cutting. And you've got a range of other tools up the top here for alignment, magnification, repositioning stuff. And you've also got a preview tool. So we'll just look at what this looks like being previewed. So that's the preview. And whilst you can't see them, there's little red lines here which show the movement of the laser head between points of the actual engraving and cutting process. And down here, it's estimated that will take around 12 minutes to do. So as I said earlier, I'll skip through some of the actual process. We don't really want to sit there and watch 12 minutes of engraving and cutting. So now all I have to do is press the start button to start the process. But before that, I'll put on my safety glasses. And there's the completed coaster. Actually looks pretty good. Took around 11 minutes. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are also automotive or motorcycle applications possible with an engraver cutter like this. And what I have done is I've actually made some gaskets on the machine. What I did was I got a factory gasket, which is this one here. It's actually a rocker cover gasket for a Moto Guzzi small block engine. And I put it on my scanner, I scanned it, and then I imported it into Infinity Photo, my photo editing software, and I tidied up the image to make it just black on white. And with that file, I actually could create a vector SVG file, which I could then use to actually cut gasket paper on the engraver. Now, gasket paper typically does come in a roll, so I actually ironed it with a steam iron first and then put it between two flat surfaces to dry, and then held it onto the honeycomb cutting bed with a magnet. And the way I set it up is that I cut the holes first, then cut around the outside perimeter of the gasket, and then cut the inside perimeter. And the material is 0.8 of a millimetre gasket material. And I think I came out rather well. Now, whether I have a use for this or not, but if you're restoring an old motorcycle or a car and you're having trouble actually getting gaskets, or you don't want to cut them by hand, this is an ideal way of making them. Though there is a little bit of effort involved in creating the vector cutting file. But once you've got it on your computer, you can cut as many as you like. So I guess you could even offer them to your friends or sell them on the internet. Well, I think that's about it for this particular review. And really, I have to say that this has been a welcome addition to my workshop, whether it's more from an entertainment point of view or whether it's going to be a truly practical item, only time will tell. But as a sign of the future, the capability of these machines will only get better and better, and I can see myself really getting a little bit of fun out of this device over the next few years. Now, I actually haven't covered the packaging and the setup of this machine, but actually it was really easy to do, and the instructions that were provided in the box were numbered, and all the packages of screws and all the parts were in numbered plastic bags, so it was really easy to assemble, and it really didn't take me that long to get it up and going. Anyway, I think that really is it for this particular review, and I'll catch you next time.